So I've recorded now. So over to yourself, Victor.
Okay, thanks, Alim. Hi, everyone. It's great to be part of Mentoring Professionals initiative for July. I've been in the project management space for around about 22 years. My first career was as a radio communications engineer, then had a stint in IT. But these days, I find myself providing training and consultancy on best practice. Um, I am an accredited trainer in PRINCE2 Agile. I also teach other project management flavors. So it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm honored to have highly experienced support now. So I'm going to pass over to Jerry to introduce himself.
Okay. Hi all, I'm Jerry Steinhauer. Similar to Victor, been around for a very, very long time, probably even longer than Victor has. And, you know, done pretty much everything that there is to do in this sphere. So, you know, listen to what Victor has to say. What he's going to say is a lot of common sense, and I'm sure we'll all get a great deal out of this. Victor, back to you.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Okay, so it's nice to have a follow-up. So soon after our last session, we had in our last session the PRINCE2 Agile sort of fundamentals, and we focused on what exactly is PRINCE2 Agile, what does it offer, how come PRINCE2 and Agile could come together. So I'm not going to dwell too much in the next two slides because you can catch up on that one as well. I'm sure Ali will give us some information on how you can find the recordings of this session and other sessions. So hey, PRINCE2 Agile, what's it all about? It's bringing together if you like, two giants in the world of project management and product delivery. So I don't think it's worth arguing against the fact that Agile is proven to be way ahead of anything we've ever had as an approach in terms of product delivery. Of course, a lot of things encompass the word Agile ways of working. A lot of frameworks fall under that category. And so to bring that together with PRINCE2, what Axelos had in mind is to give us the best of both worlds. So PRINCE2 gives us structure on projects, governance, gives us, you know, the necessary controls to make sure we get it right. So I love food, so you're gonna forgive me if some of my inferences have to do with cakes and things like that. Okay, so I love this, that the illustration of how the two come together is that of a layered cake. Okay, so 3 layers representing the 3 key levels of management on any project as recommended by best practice. And so the lowest layer is where Agile is well proven to be the strongest and yield the most benefits. We get value quickly, you know, we deliver pretty much what the customer wants. We respond nicely to change. We're not afraid of change in Agile environments, and we're taking care of risks because we are working in very short time frames and having short feedback loops. Whereas the upper 2 layers, PRINCE2 brings in pretty solid controls, and the key thing there, of course, it's its ability to be tailored. And this is one thing we need to make clear during this session, because we're talking about practicability. We forget that the PRINCE2 methodology, sometimes we forget, I should say, is principle driven, not process driven. Yes, it has processes, but it's driven by principles. And we're going to see examples of why that affects the way we interpret this practically as we go along. So driven by the principles, PRINCE2 gives us pretty solid controls in the layers above the product delivery layer. Essentially, the two coming together means we have all the controls in PRINCE2, okay, plus the benefits of an Agile environment. So we're tailoring PRINCE2 for the Agile environment. And that means it doesn't really matter if we take the 12 o'clock point, agile behaviors, right? It doesn't really matter what agile environment we are in. It is understood that to work effectively in an agile environment, certain behaviors have to be prevalent. The fact that we are working collaboratively, right? We want to be empowered. We're customer focused. Okay, we do not assume we know what the customer wants. We're constantly engaging with the customer to give them what they want. Certain behaviors are agile. Those will be part of your PRINCE2 Agile environment. The agile focus areas is even accepting PRINCE2 doesn't cover everything. And therefore, we have a risk assessment tool there to assess how agile the environment is. So we have an agilometer being brought in because of the focus areas. We have agile contracts, which PRINCE2 doesn't cover. So we're getting a more complete project management framework. Agile techniques, and this is where we use user stories and epics, where as appropriate, rather than traditional PRINCE2 documents like product descriptions, which can still be used if appropriate. Agile concepts, we embrace things like limited work in progress, which is a concept within Kanban. We embrace working iteratively and incrementally. All the concepts that agile enthusiasts would love to have are embraced here, but we'll use them as appropriate. The degree to which we use them will be appropriate. And the last one that agile brings into the PRINCE2 Agile environment, the frameworks. Of course, we've got Scrum, we've got Kanban, right? We've got, Save, we've got all sorts of, pretty solid product delivery frameworks within the Agile family. We can use them. We can use them within the context of a project that's been managed using the PRINCE2 Agile recommendations. It's all about tailoring. Now, let's start addressing the issue of practicality. How can a project, because Agile typically, unless you're an Agile PM environment, very mature Agile environment where you take care of project governance, your Agile framework typically handles product delivery, typically. So how come PRINCE2 Agile will help us to practically manage the 6 elements PRINCE2 says must be managed effectively to get it right? And those elements are time, cost, risk, scope, benefits, and of course, quality. So there are some fundamentals in Agile that we have to adhere to. And that is the fact that time and cost, we have no leeway over them. They're fixed. And therefore, the PRINCE2 Agile framework embraces this concept of fixing and flexing. So because we want to be agile, we have to be agile, time and cost will be fixed. So we're not going to flex them. So we're not going to allow tolerances around those. So the tolerance on time and cost will be 0, right? Benefits and risk, and this is the viewpoint. This has to take into consideration the viewpoint of the primary risk takers, the project board, especially the project executive or sponsor. Their risk attitude will then determine whether we flex, how much we flex, if at all, benefits and risk. But in terms of getting the work done in an agile way, and in combination with the other behaviors that must be prevalent, and we're going to mention those behaviors in a minute, quality and scope will be flexed. And the flexing of quality means we will use well-known approaches in Agile, like encouraging the customer to prioritize their requirements. And therefore, the must-haves definitely will be clearly stated. Then the should-haves and could-haves, for example, if we're using the Moscow prioritization technique, will then allow us to flex the quality. Because in the Agile environment, what do? We focus and prioritize what's most important to the customer. We believe the customer doesn't necessarily need everything, but we will deliver everything that's essential for the customer by working on that over fixed periods of time. And the scope as well can be flexed as appropriate. So back to the cake. Everything we said in the fixing and flexing might sound a little bit challenging and a little bit, you know, sort of daunting to achieve. But we must remember that in an agile environment, behaviors and certain key concepts have to be embraced anyway, or else the fixing and flexing cannot work. So for it to work, we must understand that certain targets become the essential focus of the teams. But agile enthusiasts should not be surprised at these, that we want to be on time and hit the deadlines, right? Protect the level of quality. We would embrace change. So change at the detailed level. We do not have to follow through cumbersome change management processes to get them approved. We do them, we allow the team, because we trust them, they're self-empowered to actually deal with change, embrace change at the detailed level. If there's a change to the major scope of the project, then we might need approval from the higher layers. We accept, we keep teams stable. So we try not to tinker with the teams too much, okay? We're able to keep to this target if we have paid attention to the way we have skilled the team and made sure that we have a new minimum level. And so when somebody drops off, we don't necessarily need to bring someone else in who has to learn the team ethos. So, and then accept that the customer doesn't need everything. And this is where we would encourage customers to actually fix and flex the quality requirements so that we can deliver on time and hit our deadlines. Certain behaviors are prevalent in the agile environment, and practically it's a good idea to monitor them. So a good sort of Scrum master is not seeing themselves as a manager, are they? They're seeing themselves more as a facilitator, coach, okay? And therefore, they encourage this kind of behaviors. Transparency, you know, rich communication rather. Okay, so we use tactile methods of communication. We favor face-to-face over writing reports, you know, lengthy reports of 8, 10, 12 pages, collaboration. And that means also we would use techniques that allow us to get information out quickly and directly to other teams we're working with. And within our team as well, we collaborate effectively. We self-organize, so we don't want to be managed per se. We do the planning together during sprint planning meetings. Okay, we should be trusted that we know what we're doing at that delivery level. Exploration, again, another behavior which is prevalent in the agile environment. Agile is brilliant when you do not have full knowledge of what you want to build. So we may have to explore, carry out experiments, carry out spikes. So all of these are brought into the PRINCE2 Agile environment. And this is just an example of how we could monitor this. You could use a sort of traffic light system to monitor the behavior, these behaviors within your team. And then we have practically a massive issue, which is that of the risk of applying Agile in an environment. Okay, if there are behaviors involved in it, we all know that when we want people to work in a new way, you're asking for a culture change, a change of mindset. And therefore, are all environments Agile ready? Please be mindful that we are not saying, can we use Agile or not? That's not the question. All environments we can use Agile. But if we're not careful, we may not get the rewards we want, the benefits. So to what extent do we need to adjust, right, and prepare the ground so that Agile gives us more benefits rather than less benefits? The best thing to do, carry out an assessment. So we have a tool that helps us to look at 6 key areas that can tell us how ready is the environment. So the first one, I'll just take on the first one only, flexibility on what's delivered. That slider there, when it's high, it means our customer is tuned in to flexing the requirements and is happy to use Moscow prioritization, for example, to say, here are the musts for this website you're building for us. Here are the should haves, here are the could haves. If they're ready for that, then it means that that kind of client is easier to work with. But there are situations where the client hasn't got a clue about this, hasn't got a clue about the fact that in Agile, we want quick feedback from the customer. And therefore, when we go to them within a week or two of starting the work for some feedback, they're wondering, why are you coming to me? Why are you bugging me? These are real problems we can have when the customer environment does not get it as far as the Agile thinking is concerned. So those are issues that can raise significant problems for us further down the line. So why not check 6 key areas? Level of collaboration has to do with the teams, ease of communication between the teams. The next slider, ability to work iteratively and deliver incrementally. Is that something that can be easily achieved? If not, what do we do about it? So please, the idea here is we do run this assessment before we start, but also after we've started the project, so we see the improvement. So what do we do with the results of the first assessment? We learn from it and we take action. So if the customer hasn't got a clue why they need to prioritize, maybe a 40-minute session, right? With the most influential person, perhaps the person who will be senior user, right? Or who should have the role of product owner, even if they never understood that role. Maybe they need some coaching. Maybe they need some bit of encouragement on the benefits of Agile, rather than going in bang, because we know the benefits of Agile. Hey, customers should be happy. We need to check and assess how prepared the environment is for Agile behaviors and techniques to be used. So these are the things we wouldn't have in traditional PRINCE2, if you like. And finally, before we go to the questions, beg your pardon, we would now, for those PRINCE2 proponents or those who are familiar with PRINCE2 that are worried that, look, in PRINCE2, we use a lot of documentation to ensure control. Well, because we're bringing the PRINCE2 controls into an Agile environment to get the best of both worlds, it means we will have to have, in a lot of cases, a different mindset about how the information in these documents are displayed. So in an Agile environment, one of the behaviors we saw was that of transparency, yes, the use of rich communications. Therefore, we love visuals. We want things to be visual. That helps us to be transparent. It helps people to pick up quickly through a Kanban board. What are we doing next? Yes. Oh, there's an impediment on this task, right? What is it? How long? We want things to be visual. And therefore, I always say this, the best way to interpret the tailoring of the documents in PRINCE2 is we ask the principal project manager to relax. In the Agile environment, we're chilled. Yeah, our risk register could be on the wall, right? With a few columns, right? There's essential columns, okay? Our highlight report for the board could be a colorful Vaughn chart that's displayed on a screen on the wall, right? So relax. We use tactile information. We have heavily visual, and therefore that gives us room to actually simplify the provision of the same information in a way that is easy to understand and quick to assimilate. So checkpoint reports typically are the reports from the technical guys at the delivery level to the project manager. That's a major control, right? We don't do away with that control. We simply say, hey, can the project manager pick up the information from a burn chart easily, right? So, and we can invite the project manager, since checkpoint reports are meant to be regular, they're time-driven, to our daily stand-ups. Hey, that's checkpointing. So, interesting dynamic in the way key information in key documents will be represented in the PRINCE2 Agile environment. So I hope that's enough of a teaser for the questions. So Jerry and I would now take questions from you, and I think Alan will be helping us to grab them from the chat.
Yeah, and there's loads, right? So it's great. So thank you everyone for posting your question. There's about 10 questions that have come in from the chat. For some of these, it will help, of course, Victor, if you go back to the slide that the question's from, but we'll do it after.
Absolutely.
You know, you can leave it where it is.
In fact, I have other slides as well that might come up. So
okay, all right, perfect.
Yeah.
So let me just, one more questions come in. So look, what we will do now is I will ask the questions that have come in through the chat, as I mentioned I would do. So we'll do that. But before we do that and we start asking the questions, oh, and I should mention, of course, you'll also have a chance to ask your questions verbally, right? So we'll do both, and you'll be able to ask subsequent questions. But before we do that, can I just ask, for those of you willing, if you could turn your video cameras on, please. Not necessarily, you know, unmute yourselves, just your video cameras on, because it would be great if we could take a snapshot of all of the attendees for the video recording afterwards, right? So we'll just spend, you know, 5-10 seconds on that, not much. And if you don't feel like showing your face, that's also okay. But for those of you willing, I'm just going to expand the video screen I have. And yeah, if you could just, you know, wave or just say, you know, whatever you're doing, perfect. And I will scroll
or
down
wink.
to the wink, you know, whatever is great, right? So really appreciate that. Thank you all. So now that you have helped me, let's go to the questions. Okay, so let me just come out of that screen. So first question, if I could ask, so what came in was, when you discuss fix or flex, I see many project teams flexing essential requirements for success, despite these requirements being defined up front. Strikes of bad time cost management at start of project, with Agile being used as an excuse. Any comments? And so there's quite a bit to that question as well. So what I'm going to do, just to help out, I'm going to repost it in the chat so that you can also see it, Victor and Jerry. So, you know, by all means, go to the chat so you can read the question too. But
Okay.
how do you answer that? So you'll see, when you discuss fix or flex, see many project teams flexing essential requirements for success. What's your view?
Okay, my sort of my view is this: we need to clarify what we mean by essential requirements. That's a bit that would have helped, and this is where the direct dialogue does help on these things. I'd like to know what exactly is meant by essential requirements. Now, is an essential requirement requirement that without it the washing machine is totally ineffective, right? If we can't wash, right, the clothes, right, if that particular feature is not included in the washing machine, then obviously it's a critical requirement that has to be delivered and should be a must. So if it's a must and it's critical to the function of that particular product, then obviously we shouldn't be flexing that, right? Okay, well, the fix and flexing has to be applied to all the requirements as a whole. And we're saying the must-haves will be fixed because we must have them done for the washing machine to be able to operate. So a lot depends on what essential meant.
Yeah. So in this case,
question.
Victor, there's been a subsequent, you know, follow up to that, and I kind of made an assumption it might be this. It's the MVP, right? So for those of you that aren't familiar with that, the minimum viable product. So whatever is the minimum viable product, and then you're fixing, flexing. And I know you've answered the question, but is there anything else you want to add to that?
Okay, I'm going to just mention something on the MVP quickly, and then I'll let Jerry add to this, because it's now broadened now. So I think once I've said a little bit about MVP, I'll let Jerry add to this. Okay. Now, the minimum viable product is pretty much a way of saying to the team, there has to be a point where you can demonstrate that you have expended minimal effort and achieved maximum learning, and that will build confidence to us, the customer, that you will give us a working product at the end. So it's a nice point, a critical milestone in some cases, because it can even be used to actually be tied to contractor payments. Yeah, if you achieve the MVP, yeah, that's a major milestone achieved. So it gives us maximum learning with minimal effort and therefore builds confidence. We're going to get what we want at the end. That's the role of the MVP. So I just wanted that to be put in context. And if the MVP is not met by the deadline, then that's a flag. So that's an exception situation. It doesn't mean the project is not viable, but at least because it's a measure of how well we're going and builds confidence and for the customer that we know what we're doing and we're going to deliver in the end, it's a critical milestone in that sense. Jerry.
Yeah, thanks, Victor. If I may, I'll take it back to the original question, discussing fix or flex. Many project teams flexing essential requirements for success, despite these requirements being defined up front. And what often happens in cases like this is that you don't actually have full buy-in at the more senior levels. So the message is not coming down that must-have requirements must be delivered in this project. Okay, so fix or flex cannot apply to time and cost, because time and cost is based around what you expect to be able to achieve in this project. And that has to include that minimum viable product, because that's the base minimum that you have to provide. So if you're hitting that kind of problem where you have flexing of time and cost, then that is a lack of understanding, and that needs to be addressed at a more senior level. That's not really a problem at the project level. It is a problem at the project level, but it's not a problem that can be addressed at the project level. It needs to be addressed at the executive and higher.
Okay. So this is the importance of having the senior decision makers also agile aware, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, and look, we could talk about that question in itself for quite a while, right? And sorry for starting you off with a hard one, but the question was great. And I hope it's been answered and it's been of benefit, but we have so many other questions to go through. So I'll just go through some others now. And of course, if we have time, then we'll come back to some of these. But also, if for anyone, if you feel that your question hasn't been answered or you would like a bit more time with Victor or Jerry, then as many of you know, they're also providing free mentorship. You know, they'll support you afterwards. So you'll be able to reach out to them, and I'll provide the Calendly links for how you can book time with them. Okay, so that's a separate point to mention. So let me go to the second question. Second question, again, I'll post it in the chat, but essentially the question was protected level of quality, thought quality is flexed. Okay. So I didn't fully understand that myself, but I posted in a chat. So I guess the person is asking, is the quality flexed? And so what do you mean by protect the level of quality? And this may have been on your second or third slide, Victor.
Sorry, can I jump in and just ask that myself?
Yes, please do.
So obviously on your one of the very early slides, I think it's just the one before this, that you mentioned that quality is flexible. However, on the very next slide, you then said that you have to protect the quality. So I was just confused by those two. Is it flexible, or do we need to protect it to the utmost?
Okay. Right. The issue, I would not use the fix and flex to mean flexible quality. Each methodology has its own terms, and they do need explanation. What we're saying here is this: when a customer says, I want a product, I want a website, for example, there will be certain features of that website. Some of them are absolutely critical to achieving the customer's aims for building the website. Some of them are not so critical. But typically, most customers are going to tell you, I want everything. I want a website that's as good as Amazon's website, or as good as, you know, Microsoft's website. the key is, do they really need every one of those features? Or are there some features that are actually critical to the website achieving the benefits they want, and the others are not so important? If we do not use, typically, if we do not find a way to help them prioritize, we are in danger of taking on everything. And so the critical ones and the non-critical ones take up our time. But by fixing and flexing, what we're saying is we will explore with the customer a little bit more. What do you want the website to do? Then we can get to the functionality that's critical. Those are the must-haves. And then the could-haves are, well, it might then be nice for actually us to be able to, put in, a feature that allows people, to sort of share their own ideas on how we can do better, right? That's what we're saying about fixing and flexing. It means we will focus on the most important features of that product, so that we do them first.
Sorry, but that seems to be a scope of the project rather than the quality of the outcome.
Okay, can I just say this? That is a very common sort of link that is made.
Yeah.
Okay, and yes, the quality of the products relates to whatever products are within scope. Whatever products are within scope, we will flex the quality. That's the way to look at it. Change of the flexing of the quality does not mean we have changed the scope. If we are to deliver a new washing machine, right, for Bosch, okay, now we're saying to Bosch, we're not building you a washing machine and a dryer. No, that's a change of scope. We're saying this washing machine, what are its critical features? Those are the must-haves. Then what are the could-haves? What are the ones that, okay, if we can accommodate, those extra features and still finish in time and still sell as many as you want to sell, what are the additional features we could have? So by flexing the quality parameters of the washing machine, we haven't changed the scope. We're still doing the washing machine.
Okay. So
I hope that helps.
So it helps me, right? But I've gone through the course. I get it, but I spent 3 days on this, and I fully understood how to use it and when to use it. I guess I get the feeling that for some people, they're still to be convinced, or they would like further dialogue on this.
Sure.
Right? I get that.
Sure.
So as I said, just because of the number of questions we have, though, just for that reason only, I'll move us on. If we have time to come back to this, I think we absolutely should, because obviously it's key to PRINCE2 Agile and key to a lot of people. Or this is where, as I mentioned earlier, please just book some one-to-one time with Victor or Jerry to go more into this, or it needs another session perhaps.
Yeah, I think I'll be picking up with Victor afterwards.
Okay. All right.
Yes, please. That'll be
But it's
nice,
great,
actually.
right? It's great.
Yeah.
It just makes me think that for next time we can just have a session on this, and that would take up the whole time. But so just purely for time, let me move us on. Okay. So the next question that I have, let me see. We're struggling with how Agile can be used in two main areas. One's infrastructure and one's ERP implementations. So how can Agile, let's just take one of them, Victor and Jerry, how can Agile be used in infrastructure implementations?
Okay, Jerry, do you want to go first?
Yeah, the basic answer to this is Agile has applications everywhere. It can be used anywhere, but you have to do a bit of thinking about it. So if I give you an example, a new motorway. So we're talking about the road structure for the UK, the infrastructure, the transport infrastructure for the UK. you're not going to be trying to be agile about how you lay down the tarmac or how much tarmac you're going to lay down, but you will be trying to be using agile techniques for laying sections, the individual activities within those sections. So, you've got this situation where agile could be used for parts of it where it's appropriate, but then a more traditional approach used for those elements where agility is difficult to achieve.
That's right. Yeah.
Does that help?
It will help me.
Yeah,
So hopefully in person. And I can attest to that, in that I had an infrastructure program that I was delivering, and I used this fix and flex and the agile concept as a whole to decide on which bits were essential, just like we've covered the MVP. And because there was a deadline, regulatory deadline, and we had to get the MVP parts delivered, but people, of course, wanted more. And it was using this kind of model, it simplified how strong we could be with those stakeholders. Okay, but I know this requires more discussion. Let me move us on. So someone had asked the question, Victor, can you please explain the traffic lights? So if you go back to that slide, just to provide an overview of that, please. I think it might be the next slide, right? Or maybe the one after.
Okay. So these are behaviors that we want to encourage within our agile teams, right? And Scrum masters will be familiar with these. What we're saying here is we need to promote these behaviors because they help us to achieve those targets we mentioned. Those targets aren't going to happen if we do not have guidance within the team on how we're going to be working. So we're going to be transparent, we're going to be in collaboration with each other, support each other, self-organizing, rich communications. So what the traffic lights are simply saying, here is one way you could monitor them. It's not the only way. So you could actually monitor your team's behavior this way. So the green is pretty much saying the team's actually not doing badly at all in the area of transparency. Yes, they understand it and they demonstrate it in the way they work on a daily basis. So that's a green. Nothing much to worry about there. Collaboration, not a problem. Rich communication, though, we still don't get it. People are still sending emails, right? Rather than sharing information face-to-face in a tactile manner, we've actually made it possible for them to video conference the team that's they cannot co-locate with, they're far away. And people are not using that, right? Or people are not using the sort of information radiators enough, and so we need some work on that. So we pick that up and we work on it. Self-organization isn't too bad. Yeah, we're getting better, but we might need to support the team a bit more. So it's just one way of checking and monitoring the behavior and then improving on them, knowing which areas do need improvement. It's just one method.
Okay, thanks, Victor. So let me move us on to the next question. Some of these are, so I started with the harder ones. Some of these are getting a bit easier, and then we'll get to some hard ones again. So the next question is, as a graduate of lean operations and agile, looking to enter the industry with little practical experience of agile and no experience of agile software, what would Victor suggest? So as a graduate of lean operations and agile looking to enter the industry, what's your recommendation there?
I assume the industry means project management.
Let's assume that, right? Or
yeah,
maybe
I'm
IT.
assuming that, yeah. I want to state that assumption up front, right? Okay. So what it means is you have a pretty good base, really, for being able to apply your skills and knowledge to projects that actually require agility, and lots of projects can benefit from agility. So you already have a good base for that. And I would suggest skilling yourself up in project management, whether it's taking a generic, course in project management first, or going straight for the jugular with the certifications. But then the PRINCE2 Agile course will not be out of the question in that sense. So it's skilling yourself up on the project management side of things, because you want to actually now embrace the whole idea of being able to manage a project. Without any experience, I would suggest it's a good idea to also get a mentor if possible. If you get some mentoring, that always helps in terms of sinking your teeth into things practically.
Yeah. And I'll just mention, just because it might be relevant for some, if you have done your PRINCE2 foundation or your PRINCE2 practitioner, using your PRINCE2 credentials, you can essentially do the PRINCE2 Agile practitioner using what you already have. So it's fast tracking your PRINCE2
Can I flash that up to back you up?
Oh, you had one of those in your backup slides. Perfect.
Oh yeah, I do.
Okay.
So we
then
just
I'll
flash
ask
that
the
up
next
for a
question.
second, and then there we go. So the prerequisites are there. Yeah.
Okay, great. So we'll leave it on this slide for a second then, Victor, while I ask the next question. So the next one was, is the Agilometer a standard Agile tool?
Okay, as far as I know, and I asked Jerry to confirm this, I'll be honest with you, I am not aware that it's been used in this format before PRINCE2 Agile. Maybe some other format, I'm not aware of it, right? And the key here, though, is we have 6 sliders that are the default sliders because, again, as I said earlier, please, PRINCE2 and PRINCE2 Agile are principle-driven. And there's a principle that says you should be tailoring to suit the project. We have a right within our organizations to look at the 6 sliders and say, the last one isn't giving us much. Let's change it to something else that will give us more information about how ready the environment is. So it can be tailored. But these are the 6 default sliders, right? Jerry?
Yeah. If I could just join in there, the Agilometer was designed specifically for PRINCE2 Agile. And it was designed in collaboration with the people that own the rights to DSTM. And in actual fact, if you look at within DSTM, they've got a project approach questionnaire, which performs a very similar function to this. And they have, I think it's 17 points on that questionnaire. Those 17 points have been distilled into this Agilometer because they did collaborate on this. As far as I know, this is not out in the wild anywhere else. It's not being used in any other Agile approaches, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it start being used because it does very nicely point out where your problem areas lie. And if I can just throw in one recommendation for how to use it, you see across the top, it gives you a scale 1 to 5. Change the scale, make it 6. That way you don't have a middle ground and you get a more accurate picture. Because when people can't be bothered to think, they just go 3.
Yeah, that's a good point, right?
Yeah.
So either to go to 6 or 4, I agree. Great point, right? Okay, let me move us on. So this one I'll have to post in the chat again, because there's a bit to this question. So just give me a second and I'll read it out, but you'll see it in the chat as well. For cost management in Agile, what is preferred? Fixed capacity model, time and material, or fixed price? And can you give a practical way of managing costs in an Agile environment for the fixed price model, fixed price model?
Wow, a lot of that would depend on what project you're running, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
Can you give one example, maybe?
Yeah.
One example you've worked on, and again, quite a lot to that question, but maybe one example where you would use this or what you've used.
Yeah. Jerry?
Okay. I'm going to focus in straight away on the last section there. Can you give practical ways on how to manage cost in an Agile environment and fixed price model? Because that being the last question is, I assume, the underlying question. So practical ways on how to manage cost in an Agile environment and fixed price model. Fixed price model is absolutely ideal for Agile because Agile works on a fixed price model. Agile says, when we've done our thinking up front, before we start development, we now know how long we've got and how much it's going to cost us. So if you start with how much it's going to cost, you simply work backwards from that. And you work backwards to work out how much you can deliver for that price. So it gives you a brilliant start point. And what you're looking at is identifying what your priorities are within that product backlog that you're using in the agile side of things, within that price frame. Does that make sense?
Yeah, to me.
It does to me, hopefully to the person. But again, you know, I keep plugging Victor, but Jerry is also providing his mentoring time for you. So if you have a particular question around price, fixed price, etc., then you'll reach out to him after. Again, just because we still have another 10 questions or so to go through, let me progress. So this is an interesting question, one I think you'll probably be able to answer quite quickly. The person has just asked, and maybe more of a rhetorical question, you are discussing and presenting a hybrid waterfall agile approach. Is that right? So I guess what they're asking for is this between PRINCE2 and Agile, what PRINCE2 Agile is, or what's your view there?
Jerry, you mustn't get us started on this one, must they? Okay, I'm gonna give an answer that's quite brief, right? Because we do have other sessions that will help explore this, and we actually have a panel session, don't we, that's going to devote to this. And my answer is this: there's a slight misconception that PRINCE2 can only be used in a waterfall environment. That is a misconception. It's too flexible and too adaptable to be tied down to waterfall. What this is saying the PRINCE2 traditional approach and the agile product delivery approach can give us massive benefits when we bring them together. That's what it is. Yes, I can understand why it appears that the waterfall bit is being brought in, but hey, we need to look at what is the nature of the work and what we're about to deliver. And in some environments, the waterfall approach works well. But in a lot of cases, the ability to work iteratively and incrementally as an agile over short periods of time and achieve value quicker with quick feedback loops for the customer and embrace change is a much better way to go. And so we're getting the best of both worlds, but we can't tie PRINCE2 down to just waterfall. That's just my only concern with that question. Yeah, Jerry.
Fair enough. Yeah, but let me move us on, Jerry, just because of time, right? Let me just move us on, because I know I can see you're both quite passionate about this, but let me move us on. So look, still, about 8 questions or so to go, but let me just stop here and see if anyone wants to ask a question, verbally by unmuting themselves, either on something that's been said that they want to just kind of follow up with, or just a point that hasn't been covered yet. Does anyone want to unmute themselves and ask us a question? Otherwise, I'll continue going through the chat. Anyone?
I have a question.
Yes.
Hi. I wasn't aware of the terminology of radiator, so could you explain that to me, please?
Okay, great. Okay. And before you do then, Victor, it's a great question. And Dawn, I'm not sure if you are the one that asked this in the chat or if it was somewhere else, but
I didn't know.
Okay, so there's 2 other questions in the chat then that if I just mention to you, Victor, that relate to Dawn's question. Okay, so just 1 second. So the questions were, what software do you recommend for the information radiator? Whiteboards are great, but you need to be in the office. Okay, so any kind of digital tools if you have experience with that. And the other one is, do you have an example of an information radiator? So along with Dawn's question, if you could just cover kind of the technology as well as an example and what the information radiator is, please.
Okay. So I've moved my slide on. Can you see a new slide on? Progress, general view.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So an information radiator is any tool we use, basic, sticking something on the wall, or an electronic board that displays things like progress for us. Why? We believe in transparency. We believe in using rich communications, tactile communication, easy to pull methods of sharing information, easy to understand. And therefore, our information radiators could be our whiteboards, right? And that's why I moved on to this slide. But we may be using, tools like, Jira, Red Booth, right, for agile delivery, and we can display our outputs on the screens as well, on our large screens in the rooms. So as long as it's tactile, easy to use, that's an information radiator. And what we're saying is we want people to get to the information very quickly, and easily. Jerry, anything to add in terms of the technology?
No, not really. Jira, Trello, they're the most common ones out there. The one point I would make about the information radiator, the key word is radiator. It radiates the information outwards. It's a push system rather than a pull system, which is what you've got in more traditional approaches where you're pulling reports from very often inaccessible places. This is always in display. And for a project manager working in PRINCE2 Agile, this is absolutely fabulous. Because if you think of the traditional project manager, they're constantly scratching around to try and get information to send up their highlight report to the board. Here, all they have to do is come down and look. And they've got daily information.
Yeah.
So to just clarify then, the radiator is more of a visual board to display information about the process and where you are in that process.
Yeah, correct. And if it's not permanently on display, it's of no value.
Okay, fine. I've just never used or come across radiators before, so I didn't actually know what it meant. Yeah. But that's
you
fine.
Might also have heard of big visible charts and things like that.
Well,
same thing.
Same thing.
That's fine. That's fine.
So thank you for the question from yourself, Dawn, and obviously from the others that posted that.
No worries.
So let me move on then. So I've grouped two questions together, Victor, which we've kind of already answered previously with qualifications. It's basically the courses. So maybe you'd want to go to that slide again, but I'll ask these questions as well. And then just see if there's anything that we haven't covered. So
you mean the certification slide?
Yes, please. So two questions. The first one, for an experienced PRINCE2 practitioner, what Agile certification would you recommend to achieve? So they're already PRINCE2 practitioner. And what would be the training path to it, please? And then the other question is, how does PRINCE2 Agile practitioner compare to qualifications like SAFE, the SAFE Agilist? So again, what path and how does PRINCE2 Agile compare to SAFE, if you have experience with that?
Okay, I would suggest that if one is an experienced PRINCE2 practitioner, then the Agile qualifications that are available would be to, of course, consider the PRINCE2 Agile practitioner, but also the Scrum Alliance certifications are there. We don't have a lot in terms of Kanban, but some are beginning to come up. There's a recent one that's just come up called the pragmatic Kanban approach. And why do I start with those? There is no doubt at all that Scrum and Kanban, as of today, as far as I know, are still the major leaders in terms of the widely used Agile frameworks. Then there was a mention of, sorry, Alim, what was the last bit of the question again?
The comparison. So
with SAFE, exactly.
Comparison with
Skilled
SAFE.
Agile,
Agile
Skilled Agile framework. SAFE. Okay, so we always say that, well, in terms of mature Agile environments, in terms of being able to use Agile in a project environment and scale up, then the options are PRINCE2 Agile, DSDM, and Skilled Agile framework. So that also could be something to consider. It might be worth considering. But so there's the Agile PM, right? Skilled Agile, PRINCE2 Agile, in terms of having, something close to a methodology or framework to follow. But Jerry?
Yeah, pretty much
Right.
what you just said, Victor. I would add though that safe is not really a methodology as such. It's more of a framework, and it tends to apply at the higher levels in the organization. So it applies at sort of program and portfolio level, so that you can identify the key drivers for all the projects and then slot the projects in underneath that. So if you're planning on working at program or portfolio level, consider safe. If you're planning on working at project manager level, it's not as relevant down there.
Yeah, but for an experienced Prince2 project manager, perhaps you're looking into breaking into that program level.
Yeah.
You know, so it might be worth exploring.
So maybe the MSP. So you haven't mentioned the managing successful programs.
Yeah.
But you have mentioned PRINCE2 Agile Practitioner and Scrum. And I would agree with you. I've done those and I've done MSP. So I think you've covered it, right? And just purely for time, I'll move us on to see if we could get one more.
Can I just quickly throw one other in there, Ali?
Go on. Yeah.
There's Agile Program as well.
Okay.
Another offering from the ABC Corporation, DSDM.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Agile Program Management. Yeah.
Okay. Too much then. So I thought I'd done them all, but you've just told me about one I haven't. But okay, thank you. So so you won't be surprised to hear that there are 3 other questions that are in the chat that are to do with flexing and fixing, but we've kind of covered that. And so unfortunately, if you haven't had your question answered, then as I said, reach out to Victor and Jerry. So what I'll do with the last question is I'll go to one which is to do with roles and responsibilities. And the question is, in the past, with a hybrid and stroke waterfall model, there's been issues caused around roles and responsibilities in the project team. Any guidance on how this can be managed? Now, they haven't said in agile environment, but if you think, I know you guys, if you think about Scrum, team sizes, roles, responsibilities, can you give view to that? And I see you're sharing your screen. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah. In anticipation of a question along these lines, right? Now, the challenge with the PRINCE2 and Agile coming together is a lot of frameworks fall under the Agile family. Kanban doesn't specify any roles. So in a PRINCE2 Agile environment where Kanban is being used, how do we deal with that? Scrum is pretty good at identifying roles, but the roles can be directly matched to the traditional PRINCE2 roles. So we have to find common ground, right? But the key is we must keep to those fundamentals in Agile, which is customer is king and customer has to drive this. So the recommendation, if we just take the left-hand side only, leave the right-hand side a little bit more complex for larger project environments, is at that team level, right? We could use a model like this, and we are talking about roles, not jobs. And so the traditional bit is in purple, and then the pink bit is where we are really taking care of making sure the customer's viewpoint is what drives the delivery team, because it's a PRINCE2 Agile environment, an Agile environment at the end of the day. So the customer subject matter expert is now, for the Scrum environment, the equivalent of the product owner. Whereas a customer representative can funnel the customer's viewpoint from the senior user level down into the delivery team on specific areas. Can be an expert on specific things the user wants. So there are ways in which you can tweak, right? And use more neutral roles to make sure we achieve our aim, which is to deliver value quickly to the customer and what they want. So there's a lot more to be said about this, but hey, one size cannot fit all, and they're taking care of that by using neutral roles like this. Yeah.
Thank you. Look, so much more we could say. Thank you for your questions. I hope you found that beneficial. Big thank you to Victor and Jerry. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. As I mentioned, the video recordings and the presentation documents will be made available. I've shared the links to the LinkedIn group as well as to the YouTube channel. And you'll also be receiving an email from me with Jerry and Victor's details. So, by all means, reach out to them. So on that note, thank you all. Thank you for your time, but we'll have to end there.
Thank you so much, everyone, for joining.